Well, I actually have ended up doing two different projects, and so they kind of compounded on one another, where the first project I did I realized wasn't really enough, and so then I went on to do a much more in-depth project that I'm currently working on. So for my first project, the overall question that I started with was, how consistent are English 090 sections on the Larimer campus? Or how consistent are the curricula of different 090 sections on Larimer campus? And then from there, I also asked, how well are we preparing students for their 121 classes in our developmental sections? And then for my current project, I'm looking more into more in depth into the syllabi of each individual 090 section, and I'm kind of asking the question, what are teaching methods that are most successful in preparing students for their future transfer level courses? So for my first question, which is how consistent are our sections, I did a teacher attitudes survey. For my question about how well are we preparing students for their future transfer level comp classes, I did an intro and an exit survey of all English 090 sections in fall of 2011, where I surveyed all of the 090 students at the beginning of the semester just to get a sense of their level of background knowledge. So I gave them 5 quick questions that related to the 5 course competencies for English 090. And then I asked them to answer whether these, actually they weren't questions, they were statements. So then I asked them to determine whether the statement was true or false, but instead of just saying true or false, I gave them a gradient so they could say, I'm pretty sure this is true, I'm positive this is true, I'm not sure at all, I'm pretty sure this is false, or I'm positive this is false. And so that just gave me a sense not only of what they knew, but also how confident they were in their knowledge. And then I gave them the exact same survey at the end of the semester, and then I compared how many answers they got right at the beginning versus how many answers they got right at the end. And so now for this kind of second half of the project that I'm currently working on, I'm doing a curriculum map of all the English 090 syllabi from that fall 2011 semester, and then I'll be comparing that with institutional research data that will look at how many or what percentage of students from each section went on to pass English 121 with a C or higher within 1 year, which will be at the end of this current semester. So I'll be soliciting that information from IR at the end, once grades are in for this semester, and then I'll compare it to the curriculum map that I have compiled so I can see what the more successful sections were doing, so we can look at best practices and determine what works for our students. I haven't got the results for the part of the project that I'm currently working on this semester. I'm still finishing my curriculum map. What I can see from the sections that I've already mapped is that we're already doing a pretty good job. There haven't been any sections so far that failed to address any of the course competencies. So everybody is touching on those course competencies at least a little bit. That's pretty reassuring to hear that we are doing most of what we should be doing. However, it's kind of frustrating because then that doesn't really clue us in a lot to why we're having these problems with our developmental students. And if everybody's doing what we think they should be doing and we're still not seeing success, it kind of tells us that we have to go back to the drawing board even with what our course competencies turn out to be. But again, I haven't fully finished analyzing that data, so I can't say for sure at this point. But for the initial first 2 phases of the project, which were the teacher attitude survey and the intro and exit survey of the students, I found mixed results. So for the teachers, everybody was pretty much on the same page. And that was reassuring in one sense, But again, it didn't reflect what I had anecdotally been noticing going into people's classes and having conversations with people. So part of it is, I think that there was maybe some bias in my design, in the way I designed the survey, in that a lot of the questions were questions where it was kind of obvious to tell, or it was kind of obvious what the right answer was. But in terms of the intro and exit survey, for the intro survey, I found out pretty much what I expected, which is that our O9O students, or our developmental students, come into those classes all over the map. They have very different needs, very different levels of background knowledge when they come into a class like developmental composition. On the exit survey side, I found that most students were able to overcome a challenge that they may have had at the beginning of the semester after having that 15 weeks of instruction, except in the areas of grammar and writing processes, which are two of the major course competencies for O9O. So I had a question that related to grammar, and just as many people got it wrong at the end of the semester as did at the beginning of the semester, and I had a question about revision, and similarly, just as many people got it wrong at the end of the semester. And so that kind of told me that we're not doing enough instruction in the semester to help students deal with grammatical and writing processes challenges. And they were pretty easy questions. Like, for example, in the grammar question, I asked them to identify the subject of a sentence. And at the end of the semester, most of the students still could not do that. So that was kind of troubling. I mean, it just shows that we need to beef up our emphasis on grammar, or find a different approach to teaching grammar, which is, I think, the direction that we're really going now. And so then for the second half, which I haven't finished yet, the idea that we're working with now is that we're going to take the curriculum map that I create, the institutional research data that I collect, and use that to determine what were the best practices, what was working in those sections that I reviewed, and then based on that, we'd really like to develop some common lesson plans that would keep instructors on the same page so that people aren't just doing different things in their classes, but everybody's more or less giving students the same experience. When I developed these projects and I had to tell my superiors and the people that were funding me how I was going to close the loop, for the first half of the project, it was disseminating that research at the in-service meeting. For this project that I'm working on now, it's going to be those common lesson plans that we come up with as a department for instructors to use, so that everybody's more or less on the same page. Well, I think that the changes that we've made to how we teach grammar, or at least the changes that we're starting to make, really have improved student learning, because typically, I mean, we were failing with grammar. We just were. We were teaching it the old school way. It's boring. Students don't care. They don't understand why it's relevant. And it's so abstract that it really doesn't even make sense to them in the first place. This new approach is more organic. It kind of asks the students to write first and then look at and analyze what they wrote in a grammatical way, as opposed to teaching them the grammatical rules and then asking them to apply it to their writing. But I can't really take credit for that, because it was, again, my colleagues' method that I just adopted based on the need that I saw through my research. I know that for me personally as an instructor, I found that the intro and exit surveys and the teaching attitude survey was very beneficial, because it helped me realize what I valued as an instructor. It helped me understand what the needs of my students are coming into the course, and it helped me understand areas that I wasn't being totally successful, like grammar and revision, that I needed to improve. And so when I went to revise my curriculum, those were the areas that I focused on. I learned that it doesn't take a whole lot to make a pretty big change to even a class or a program. In this case, I knew nothing about assessment before I participated in the Institute for Student Learning, which was where I developed my initial project. And so that kind of got my feet wet in terms of data collection, data analysis, closing the loop. I didn't even know what that was before I started focusing more on developing my assessment projects. I joke about statistics, but that really is something that I've had to learn to apply to my projects. I mean, understanding if the result was statistically significant or not and things like that. Assessment is awesome. I've just been really, I think it's really benefited my teaching practices to be able to look more in depth into these methods and how our students are taking what they're learning in our developmental classes to their transfer level courses. So it's been a very beneficial opportunity for me, a good project to be involved in.